A bistro filled with laughter until the blood hit the tablecloth. Welcome to Faded Echoes. I am your host, Ombra. Tell me where you're listening from. I love seeing this community grow. Your voices make every mystery come alive. Let's begin. A man who leaves a sealed glass jar on our front steps at 9:15 in the morning, ring and run, has either a nerve, a schedule, or a violent allergy to consequences. I missed him by 12 seconds, my record for the vestibule dash, and got the tail end of a blue cap turning the 9th Avenue corner while I was busy with the knob. I hollered, "Hey," because that's what you do in New York when there's nothing else to do, and came back with the jar. It was one of those wide-mouthed restaurant jobs with a glass lid and metal latch. The latch had been secured with red wax like somebody didn't trust modern technology. Tied around the neck with butcher's twine was a folded index card, the good kind you buy when you're making a plan to look sensible. The handwriting was small and careful, the sort of thing you see in bank statements and ransom notes. I read it right there in the hall because I've learned not to bring surprises into Wolfe's office unvetted. The card said, "There is human blood in this sauce. It was served last night at Bistro Ravel, special tasting menu, course 5. If you have any decency, you will stop them. The chef knows. So does the investor. Do not call the police. Yet, a friend of the truth." Fritz crossed the threshold just in time to catch me frowning at it. That man does not so much walk as appear in doorways with timing you could set a soufflé by. He had a dish towel over his shoulder and a look on his face like I had brought home a live raccoon. "What is that, Archie?" "It's a jar," I told him, "and also a note. The note says there is human blood in the jar. The jar says nothing." His hands went up. That's Fritz when civilization is threatened. Palms skyward, no weapons. "Please," he said, "not in here. Mr. Wolfe." "Mr. Wolfe," I said, "goes upstairs at 9 to Orchids, and it is 9:17. You may stop using the Lord's name in vain and start using your kitchen door. I'm not opening it. You're not opening it. Nobody opens it." Fritz looked like a man considering conversion to another profession. I kept it at arm's length and would have walked it back out if curiosity didn't have a faster stride than my self-preservation. The waxed latch was old-fashioned, but the jar was new and factory clean. Through the thick glass, I could see dark sauce, the kind the French like to push at you as proof that cattle can be liquefied. It held to the side in a sheen when I tilted it, which I admit I did twice before deciding to stop flirting with it. Fritz said, "You will not put that in my refrigerator." "I will not," I promised. "I'll put it on my desk and we'll see if it explodes. If it does, we call the army. If it doesn't, we wait for the man who gets paid to sit and be wise." There are many things you can put on Nero Wolfe's desk without getting a lecture. Most of them are books. I set the jar on my own desk, against the corner where I could keep an eye on it from behind the typewriter, and took the note into the office like a man carrying a bug on a leaf. At 9:30, I heard the elevator whine and the footfalls of a large man who does not hurry. He came through in the yellow house shoes, filled the room, glanced once at the jar, and did not look again. If Nero Wolfe ever wrote a letter to fate, it would begin, "Sir, I object to your timing." "You brought something," he said to me, without sitting yet. He sniffed, but not in the direction of the jar. He was checking for any betrayal of aromas he didn't authorize. "It isn't coffee." "A delivery," I said, "possibly from the devil. We have, on the premises, a jar of sauce from Bistro Ravel with a note alleging it contains human blood." Wolfe shut his eyes and opened them again, which is as close as he comes to making a sign against evil. He went to his chair, eased himself into it, and finished the journey like a steamship docking. He placed one palm on each chair arm, took in a breath, and then gave the jar half a second of thought. "Fritz," he called, not loudly. Fritz appeared. If Nero Wolfe raises his voice, someone is dead. If he doesn't, we're about to treat something dead like it belongs to a higher species. The kitchen, Wolfe said, is not to be trespassed by that item. Nothing of it, not the air around it, is to enter. Archie. Yes, sir. Put it on the window ledge. Open the window 2 inches, not more. Close the curtains. I did as instructed. The spring day outside was making up its mind about sunlight, and the glass lid winked once in a beam before the curtains settled like a theatre going dark. Wolfe wiggled his fingers at me for the note. I handed it over. He read it twice, because once is for the words and twice is for the spaces between them. There is human blood in this sauce, he quoted. Pish. It is an absurd sentence. Humans are ineluctably composed of blood among other elements, and sauce is sauce. What the writer wishes to suggest is that the sauce contains an admixture of human blood, which is a separate matter. Granted, I said. We can ask a lab. It'll cheer them up, same as it did us. No, Wolfe said. The police laboratory will not have it, and you won't hand that to any municipal functionary to gorge on. You will locate a private facility competent in serological tests. You will watch them like a cat watches a mouse. They may take a few drops for analysis without in any way contaminating the whole. Until then, it remains sealed. Fritz. Yes, Mr. Wolfe. Have you heard of Bistro Ravel? Fritz made a face you sometimes see on priests when a parishioner confesses to liking jazz. It is new, on 45th. They put raspberries in their demi-glace. A fashion. Then, Wolfe said, they have already advertised their willingness to offend. It is very popular, Fritz said. He was not sneering. Fritz is a tolerant man and even forgives sauces he dislikes the way good people forgive their relatives. There is a woman, the one with the money. She has been in the Gazette. Serena Pike. I looked at him. Good Lord, Fritz, you read the society pages? I read everything that speaks of kitchens, he said with dignity. She was saying New York requires simple food without fuss, but then she spoke of her chef as an artist. It is a conflict. Most partnerships are, Wolfe said. He touched a finger to the index card. A friend of the truth. Bah, preachers. Archie, call the Gazette, not Lon Cohen, a man who writes of restaurants. Jude Kavanaugh, I said. He once called Fritz's duck confit impossible to review because a hymn is not a menu item. Fritz smiled involuntarily. Wolfe pretended not to see it. Good, Wolfe said. Get him. Ask him what he knows of Ravel. Who is the chef? Who is the investor? Who else has ambitions there? Who has enemies? He closed his eyes, which is how he sometimes clears a space in his head for the arrangement of facts like teacups on a tray. When he opened them again, he looked toward the curtained window without moving anything but his gaze. I disclaim any intention of tasting that, he said, now or ever. Fritz. Yes, sir. If we find that human blood has been used, Wolfe said, and the words came out slow, not because he was groping, but because he was putting weight on each, we will ruin those responsible. There are many sins in cooking, but none so abominable as concealing filth in it. Concealing, I said. So you are assuming it was sabotage. I am assuming we have been interrupted, he said. I detest being interrupted for trifles. If this were a vulgar prank, it could be ignored. The choice of target, the manner of delivery, the invocation of decency? No. Someone wants to direct a blow at that establishment and is trying to conscript us as the lever. It is childish. It also may be cruel. I will not be used unknowingly. That, from Wolfe, was the closest you get to a drum roll. When he is stung, he doesn't swat. He changes the room. I went to the phone and got the Gazette. Kavanaugh wasn't at his desk, but he answers quicker for me than he does for some, because he gets tipped when the brownstone produces a scoop he can eat. He had 3 minutes between destinations to tell me that Bistro Ravel was the place to go if you liked seeing people look at other people seeing them. The chef, one Etienne Marc, had a respectable past in Lyon. The investor and visible face was Serena Pike, who had a background in tech that had turned into a background in everything. The maitre d' was a slick little arranger named Lionel Crest, an ear for whispers and a nose for money. There was also, Kavanaugh said, a partner nobody saw much of, a silent whose husband had died last winter, leaving a smile and some cash. He promised me names and the spelling for my notes, and when I asked for enemies, he laughed in my ear. "Archie," he said, "they have more enemies than seats. The chef fired his sous on opening week. The investor promised to keep prices down and then doubled them. The critic from the Ledger wrote that their steak tasted like money, which might explain why it was so hard to chew. If you're asking, you know something, I'll trade you something. My something first. They're having a private tasting this week for, rumor says, a famous senator. Possibly last night. Your something? Your line is bad, I told him. Goodbye. I relayed the gist to Wolfe, who absorbed it like a blanket absorbs heat. He asked for spellings and got them. He knows how the world fits together, and he likes to be exact about the parts. "And the senator?" he asked. "Not named. Kavanaugh is fishing." "If there was a tasting," Wolfe said, "then our jar may derive from it. If it contains what the note alleges, there has been a calculated attempt to injure. If it does not, then someone is attempting to employ us in an injury through falsehood. I'm indifferent as to which is viler." "Archie." "Yes? Call Mr. Kramer." "Now?" I asked. "You just said no municipal functionaries." "Not for the jar," he said. "For information. He will know if a great man was entertained last night at a small table and if he suffered any intestinal drama consequential to it. You will tell him nothing. You will listen. You may remind him that when I call him after lunch, his disposition is improved." Inspector Kramer of Homicide North is improved after lunch the way Niagara Falls is improved by a teacup, but I made the call. He wasn't in. I left a message with the civilian at his desk that sounded like I was just checking on the weather, and then rang off. "The jar," Wolfe said. "You will deliver it to a private lab, not Parker, he's a clod, the one on 53rd. You have a lab." "I have a list," he said, "of people whose work is tolerable. Jules Markham. He worked for the army once upon a time and has not since let himself become an imbecile. You will impress upon him that this is a test for hemoglobin and not a banquet. You will tell him that if you see a spoon in his hand, you will break his wrist." "Delighted," I said. "If we weren't already dear friends, that would do it." He half closed his eyes again and then opened them. "Fritz." "Yes, Mr. Wolfe." "You will discard any veal stock presently prepared. Make fresh. You will scrub the pots. You will leave the kitchen door shut. Nothing touches anything. As of now, the brownstone is sealed against culinary intrusion. If there is blood at large in the city's bistros, it will not find hospitality here." Fritz did not argue. As a general rule, Fritz argues on topics like whether Tarragon's is superior to Cherville in this month's State of the World. On this, he nodded once, solemn. I got my hat, the notebook, and the jar, which I tucked into a brown paper bag with a handle. I didn't like carrying that around. It felt like walking a terrier that could sue you. At the door, I turned back. "Suppose," I said, "the test comes back negative." Wolfe was looking not at me, but at that place in the air where I sometimes suspect he keeps a chalkboard. "Then someone has chosen a viscid, flavorful vehicle for a lie. They have chosen us as heralds. I will still attend to it. I am, among other defects, proud." He sent me a glance that was all edges. "Do not delay. It is ridiculous to have that in my house." I went out, keeping the bag at the length of my arm like the handle was a snake. On the stoop, the mail carrier was coming up with a rubber band around 3 bills and a catalogue you could live out of for a year if you didn't like food. He looked at the bag, looked at me, and shook his head. "Don't ask," I told him. He didn't. Mailmen have wisdom. By 10:15, I was in Jules Markham's spotless little lab on 53rd, a white room where glassware stood like soldiers, and the smell was of cleaning fluid and something faintly iron. Markham himself looked like an embalmer who had decided chemistry was a cleaner profession. He took the bag with 2 fingers. "Sealed," he observed. "Am I to believe I cannot open it?" "You can open it under my eyes," I told him, "and under conditions that would get you hired as a germ." He lifted his brows. "Hemoglobin? Possibly." "Human," I said. "Not a murder case. A food case." He made a face I had seen before on men whose souls live in microscopes. "Food," he said, like he was trying the word on a plate. "All right. We will be exact." He set up like a man preparing to baptize a bomb. When he undid the wax with tweezers and lifted the latch, he did it so slowly I forgot to breathe. When the seal opened, there was a smell that would have made a Frenchman sit up and quote poetry. Butter, cognac, browned bone, something wild and forest floor. I put a handkerchief over my nose anyway, because once you read the word blood, your nostrils don't listen to reason. He took a glass capillary pipette and a spot of the sauce the size of a mosquito's breakfast. He did not taste. This is why Jules Markham is on Wolfe's list. "You'll wait," he said. 15 minutes. "Wonderful," I said. "I'll just catch up on War and Peace." Back at the brownstone, the phone rang at 10:29. Wolfe picked it up himself because when he's calculating, he does not like the interposition of secretary's assistants or me. "Yes," he said when I wasn't there. "Kramer. You were at a dinner last night?" "No. Then a man of consequence was." "Ravel. I see." "No, Inspector. I have nothing for you. When I do, I will do you the favor of pretending I want your opinion." He hung up and looked at the curtained window. At 10:41, Markham cleared his throat. "Mr. Goodwin." "Yes," I said, and it came out even though I had the sensation of standing on the edge of a diving board. "This is preliminary," he said, "but it is affirmative. The reagent positive for human hemoglobin." "Human?" I said. "Not bovine, not porcine." "I said human," he said, mildly offended. "You asked for excellent. Be grateful." I was grateful like a man watching a train he didn't want to board pull into the station anyway. I thanked him, had him reseal the jar as best he could, paid him more than he asked because I intended to make his grandchildren love me someday, and carried the bag back down through a city suddenly too bright for the contents. By 11:30, I was in our office again. Wolfe had not moved, but he had changed. That happens with him. The posture stays and the atmosphere shifts like a barometer. He looked at my face and knew. "Human," I said. "Markham says yes." "Very well," Wolfe said. "Now we can begin." He did not ask for lunch early. He did not reach for the beer. He did not utter a single profanity, which would have been his right. He directed his gaze precisely to the place where the jar sat behind the curtains, and then away. "You will call Miss Serena Pike," he said. "You will tell her there is a matter of grave importance touching her enterprise that will be discussed only in person. You will name 4 o'clock. If she cannot, you will name it regardless. And, Archie—" "Yes." "Do not tell her why." The way he said it told me he already had a reason, and that it was one he wasn't going to share until he'd lined up the chairs and the pressure. If you want to see a man enjoy a battle without standing up, watch Nero Wolfe prepare to defend his kitchen by proxy. I picked up the phone and got a number from information. It rang 4 times. A woman's voice came on, clear and cool and on top of her day. Serena Pike would be exactly that. She was used to making New York come when she called. It was time she heard a different bell. "Ms. Pike," I said, "this is Archie Goodwin, Nero Wolfe's assistant. Mr. Wolfe requests your presence at 4 o'clock this afternoon at his office on West 35th to discuss a matter of grave importance touching Bistro Ravel." It pertains to the welfare of your patrons, the liberty of your associates, and the survival of your investment. He will not discuss it on the telephone." There was a silence in which I could hear the quality of her thinking. Most people make noise when they think. The smart ones make quiet. She said, "Mr. Wolfe does not leave his office." "He does not?" I agreed. "And yet," she said, "I am to come to him." "You are," I said, "unless you prefer the alternative." "What alternative is that?" "If this matter proceeds without your input," I said, "it will proceed on the basis of public interest. If that happens, I cannot guarantee the sequence of events. Mr. Wolfe prefers to announce his conclusions in an orderly room, not a chaotic one." Another silence. "4 o'clock," she said, "and I will bring my chef." "Do," I said. "Bring only those you trust." She gave a breath that told me about the people she trusted and their scarcity. "There are none," she said. 4 o'clock. When I hung up, Wolfe was looking satisfied in the way a boa constrictor might be satisfied by the existence of a rabbit somewhere nearby. He folded his hands on his belly, and the case, because that's what it now was, entered the brownstone like weather enters a day. I thought we were done for the moment. Then, at 11:58, Fritz came in and frowned at the low bookcase along the wall under the south window. Fritz does not, as a rule, frown at furniture. He went to it, bent, and then straightened like he didn't like what he'd found. "What?" I said. He held up the wooden spice tray we keep there for the small useful things, paper clips, rubber bands. The knife I refused to admit came out of the kitchen, and the little jar of Spanish pimenton that I use when Wolfe is not watching. "It was here," he said. "Now it was on the floor." "Maybe the floor wanted paprika," I said. "Set it back." He did, and left. Wolfe watched his exit with interest and then said nothing. That's one of his tricks. He gives silence the job of thinking until it sweats. At 1 o'clock, we had lunch. Scrambled eggs with chives, toast, a salad with radishes cut as if Fritz were paying them compliments. I did not look at the curtains. Wolfe ate and drank 1 beer, and did not once allude to the jar. At 2:30, the phone rang. Inspector Kramer's voice came through like a man chewing an unlit cigar. "Goodwin, your boss called me for gossip. You're getting it. A senator was at a private dinner last night at Revel. He ate, he drank, he did not die. But this morning he's home and there are 2 men with badges near his bathroom. He's nauseated. He's also angry. He's also famous. If you and your boss so much as breathe in his direction without an invitation, I will turn you into floor mops. Do you hear me?" "I hear you," I said. "We'll bring our own handles." "Yeah," he said and hung up. I relayed it. Wolfe closed his eyes. He does not like politicians, but he likes anything that threatens to disturb his schedule even less. At 4 o'clock, the bell would ring. The brownstone would take in strangers. Wolfe would sit, heavy as a mountain, and let them climb him like tourists. He had taken the case. He had not told me why, but I knew enough. There are lines in the world he draws that are not legal lines or moral lines, but private ones he does not let people cross. One of them has a kitchen at the end of it. At 3 o'clock, he sent me upstairs to remind Theodore that the 4 to 6 orchid session would be curtailed. Theodore grunted like a man whose orchids were about to be tried by jury. I came back down in time to pass Fritz again at the bookcase. He was looking at the spice jar, and he didn't like it. "Archie," he said, "it moved." "Everything moves," I said, "even glaciers." "No," he said, not smiling, while we had lunch. "It has moved." Wolfe heard that, and a tiny muscle in his cheek ticked. He turned his head very slowly toward the curtains. Outside, a car passed, unimportant. Inside, the house had shifted by a shade we wouldn't feel until it tilted. "Very well," he said, and for his tone alone I could have predicted thunder. "Let them come." Wolfe didn't say, "Lock the doors," but the air in the office got that way. He had me pull 2 extra chairs from the hall and angle them so nobody could see the south window without craning. He told Fritz to put beer on ice, but not bring it until he rang twice, which is Wolfe's version of a feint. Then he crooked a finger at the bookcase. "Again," he said. "Show me." I took the little pimenton jar in 2 fingers and set it dead center on the tray's front edge. Fritz had a good eye. The ring it had left in dust wasn't where it was now. Dust isn't my religion, but Fritz doesn't let it accumulate. The faint circle was fresh enough to be useful. I crouched, put my face level with the edge, and looked along the grain toward the south window. The curtains had been still since I closed them. I went over and put a hand under the drape. The sash was where I'd left it. No, it wasn't. You develop a tactile memory after a couple thousand days in the same room. I'd opened it 2 inches. It was closer to 3. "Draft," I said, "or a ghost with a screwdriver." "Drafts do not pull sashes," Wolfe said. "Inspect." I lifted the curtain carefully. The jar on the ledge sat like a guilty conscience. When I touched the lower rail of the window, I felt a tiny nick near the latch, recent enough to be bright. On the sill itself was a grit that wasn't ours, a smear of gray the size of a comma, and a thread of something like fishing line, invisible until it caught a ray and flashed. I got my pocket knife and teased it free. Monofilament, thin enough to slip through the crack, strong enough to move small things. I showed Wolfe. He looked at the line, not touching it, and his mouth went in the direction it goes when he's presented with human ingenuity applied to stupidity. "Not necessarily stupidity," he said. "Temerity. Someone wished to ascertain whether they could manipulate objects within this room without entering it. They tested the spice jar because it is small and would advertise its displacement to a watchful man." "Us," I said. "Precisely." He settled deeper. "Replace the sash to 2 inches. Remove the filament and put it in an envelope, and do not, under any circumstances, discuss this with Miss Pike or her coterie unless I ask you to. We will not parade our apprehensions for their amusement." I obeyed. The envelope went in my desk drawer, under the blotter with other mementos of people who thought strings and poles were good substitutes for brains. The jar on the ledge watched me from behind the curtain like a one-eyed thing. At 3:30, I called down to Fritz for coffee because I was not going to greet a tech millionaire and her Frenchman with a yawn. Wolfe refused, as is his right, and occupied himself by reading half a page of Pliny with the attention he gives a man he intends to quote against his wishes. At 3:50, I checked the vestibule, cleared the hall, and put a fresh notepad on my knee that said, "Pike, March, Crest, Silent," across the top. It's an old trick. You write the names you expect to hear from people's mouths, and when they say a different one, it earns a circle. At 4:01, the bell rang. A composed sound, not the frantic mash you get from delivery boys and widows. I went, opened, and met Serena Pike. If you've never seen money learn to stand upright, it looks like her. Not overdressed, not under. A suit that would cost you a vacuum cleaner if you didn't blink at the right time, hair pinned with a geometry that made you think of buildings. Her eyes were dark and on the move. Behind her, and fractionally to the left because he knew where he fit, came Etienne Marche, narrow and fine-boned, his chef's whites converted to street clothes without surrender, black jacket, clean hands, a little line of impatience between the brows. A third shadow leaned on the banister, smiling at me because that's what he does for a living. "Miss Pike," I said. "Mr. March. And you are?" "Lionel Crest," the smile said for him, with a French pronunciation on the lion that didn't belong to him. "If Mr. Wolfe insists on admitting only those Miss Pike trusts, we 3 are perfectly qualified." Serena didn't look at him. "We are expected," she told me. "You are," I agreed, and led them down the hall. In the office, Wolfe didn't rise. He doesn't, and when you meet him, you learn why he doesn't need to. He had set himself with a bulk that let you know the chair was a throne only because the man sat in it. He flicked his eyes at each face and filed them. "Miss Pike, Mr. March, Mr. Crest," he said, like attendants. "Sit." They did, with variations. Serena took the chair angled to face him full on. March chose the edge of the nearest seat and didn't settle into it, his weight ready to spring away from stupidity if it touched him. Crest eased himself into the third and crossed an ankle on a knee, displaying confidence and a nonchalance that was going to be expensive sooner or later. "You summoned us with drama," Serena said. "I assumed there would be a reason." "There is," Wolfe said. He let the word hang long enough to make them feel its weight. Bistro Revel served a sauce last night that contained human blood. Serena didn't blink. She didn't go white. She didn't gasp. She put the sentence somewhere in that cool head and marked it for priority. March did both at once, flushed and blanched. Crest's smile stayed where it was, which is one of the reasons I don't like professional smilers. "That is impossible," March said, crisp as shaved fennel. "My kitchen is immaculate. We do not. This is an obscenity." "It is," Wolfe agreed. "And yet it happened." Serena's eyes narrowed a notch. "You are certain?" "Yes," Wolfe said. "A reliable serological test performed by a competent private chemist." Mr. Goodwin witnessed the procedure. "Be grateful I'm speaking to you before I'm speaking to the Board of Health." Crest leaned in, palms up, voice silked. "Mr. Wolfe, you must understand what is at stake. A lie like this could ruin—" "It would," Wolfe said. "But I am not lying." He inclined his head half an inch toward March. "Last night, course 5. Identify it." March swallowed. "Chevreuil, venison. Roasted with a reduction of stock and cognac and a touch of—" His nostrils flared. He stopped himself from saying raspberries at the last second, remembering Fritz out in the hall by instinct or luck. "It is my signature." "And who made it?" Wolfe asked. "I did," March said, and then remembered he had lieutenants. "I finished it. The stock is prepared by my saucier. The reduction for that service was done by me to order, in the pan." "Names," Wolfe said. "The saucier, the sous chef, anyone who could have had access to your mise en place between 5 and 10 p.m., Serena answered. March was busy choking on pride. "Saucier is Mateo Ruiz. Sous is Dana North. Line 2, Kiko Tan. Pastry, Colleen Ward, though she wouldn't go near the meat station. Steward is Pavel. I'm not giving you their last names without a reason." "You have one," Wolfe said. "Add your maitre d', Mr. Crest, sommelier, and any partner with authority to enter the kitchen." Crest was offended on time. "The dining room does not invade the kitchen." "The dining room," Wolfe said, not looking at him, "invades everything, the sommelier." "Branco," Serena said. "Just Branco, like he thinks he's Prince, and the partner is Marta Kellerman. She's not involved in operations." "Yet she can open doors," Wolfe said. He turned to March. "Were there any injuries last night? Any cuts? A nick, a scratch, a man with a bandage who refused to be sent home?" March's chin lifted. "Cuts happen. We have procedure. We stop. We sanitize. We discard. No one bled into a sauce." "Names," Wolfe said, as if he'd asked about the weather. "Who cut?" March hesitated, and that killed 2 birds, his denial and Serena's patience. "Etienne," he glared at her. "Dana nicked herself at 6. It was nothing. I replaced her at meat for an hour. Mateo did fish. It was handled." "And the sauce you finished," Wolfe said. "You turned your back on it never." "Of course I turned. There are tickets, there are plates flying, there is a senator in the private room, and Miss Pike wants—" He stopped. Serena didn't move her head to him, just her eyes. "I wanted nothing except competence." Wolfe was pleased by none of it. He let a beat go past to make them hear the ticking. You will provide Mr. Goodwin with a complete list of staff on duty last night, with contact numbers. You will also provide the names of anyone dismissed in the last month under acrimonious circumstances. Crest laughed softly. Acrimonious covers the industry. Still, Wolfe said. And Miss Pike, you will summon the following to my office tomorrow at 8 o'clock. Yourself, Mr. March, Mr. Crest, Mr. Ruiz, Miss North, the sommelier, your steward, and Mrs. Kellerman. If any is absent without explanation acceptable to me, I will call the Department of Health at 8:05. They will shut your doors pending an inspection, and reporters will congregate like pigeons. If you wish to avoid that, keep the hour. Serena studied him. You expect me to deliver my team to be humiliated? No, Wolfe said. To be questioned. If humiliation results, it will be because it was earned. March leaned forward, tight and tremulous. You are accusing. I am not accusing, Wolfe said, level. I am arranging facts so that the guilty will reveal themselves. I do not require your help for that. I require your presence. Crest's smile tried another approach. Mr. Wolfe, allow us to see this alleged evidence. If you have a jar, its contents could have been— No, Wolfe said, the single syllable filling the room. You will not see it. If you saw it, you would be tempted to remove it, to corrupt it, to contrive that it had never existed. I will not permit that temptation to exist. Be grateful I am sentimental enough to speak to you before the news speaks for me. Serena breathed out, not quite a sigh. All right, 8 o'clock. I will bring them. In return, you keep your Board of Health on its leash, and you do not speak to any reporter. I do not speak to reporters unless I wish to, Wolfe said. And I never wish to speak to the Board of Health. You have my word until tomorrow at 8:30. After that, my word will depend on what I have heard. She rose. March rose because she did. Crest took his time, gauging whether a parting line would buy him anything, and decided to spend on a small one. If you are wrong, he said, you will be very, very sorry. If I am wrong, Wolfe said, I will be annoyed. That is worse. I saw them out. On the stoop, Serena paused, turned back. Mr. Goodwin, who told you about last night? Who is trying to hurt us? Bring the list, I said. We'll tell you who after we know. On my way back to the office, I went by the back hall and out to the little yard. It had rained 2 days ago, and the garden soil held the prints of sparrows and men. Along the brick under the south window was a scuff where a shoe had twisted for purchase and a faint white scrape on the iron of the delivery gate latch. I took out the little flashlight I keep for crime and bad wiring and found what I expected. A ghost of monofilament still caught under the latch, cut clean. Someone had anchored a line here, fed it through the narrow gap of the sash, and tried their hand at puppetry. When I reported, Wolfe's mouth went to that thin place again. So, he said, we have been tested. It is intolerable and therefore valuable. The phone rang. I took it. Jules Markham, dry as chalk. Mr. Goodwin, an addendum. Your sample shows chelating agent traces. EDTA, common in laboratory tubes for blood collection. If human blood was introduced, it was not from a cut on a finger. It was drawn. Confident. As confident as a man can be with a cooked matrix, he said. Enough to spoil my lunch. I thanked him and hung up. Wolfe's eyes were on me, asking without asking. Not a kitchen accident, I said. Somebody poured. He nodded once. Then our friend of the truth is something else, a friend of the theater. Very well. Call Saul Panzer. Ask him to observe Bistro Ravel tonight. Back alley, delivery doors, staff entrances. He is to watch hands and bandages and to note who leaves early and who arrives late. And Archie, keep the rear window latched. If anyone desires to fish in my office again, they can try the Hudson. I rang Saul. He doesn't say hello like a normal man. There's the flick of a match, the sound of a city taking a breath, and then Panzer. Bistro Ravel, I said. Back alley and staff doors. Hands, bandages, arrivals, departures. Quiet. You may be paid twice if you find a way to be in two places at once. I already am, he said. What am I looking for besides hands? A courier who doesn't look like lettuce, I said. And any reason to think last night's sauce was a group project. Got it. He hung up. Saul hangs up like it's a favor. Wolfe had his eyes closed, which means they were open on the inside. Fred, he said without moving anything else. I called Fred Durkin and told him the backyard and the south wall were to be his view until midnight. Someone tugged a line through the office window today, I said. If there's another puppet master, you yank him off the stage. Fred grunted assent. He likes it when you give him a wall to guard. It makes him feel like the Alamo with better sandwiches. At 5:30, I went to Ravel. The dining room was half light and half mirrors, the kind of place that thinks the main course should be you looking at yourself. Crest was at the podium with a book open and a phone to his ear, but he smiled anyway, because that's what the job requires if you want the tips to believe they were born. We are setting, he said. Miss Pike is in the kitchen, I guessed, and I was right. She was at the pass with March, talking under the hood hum. She saw me and didn't come out. That told me she had already decided how much access I was getting. I lifted my notepad. Names, numbers, addresses. Attendance at 8 o'clock is non-negotiable. Wolfe's instructions. She didn't fight it. She signaled to a woman with a shaved head and a wrist full of rubber bands who had a tablet and a spine. Dana North. The bandage on her index finger was neat and fresh. She flexed the hand like she resented having one. She handed me a printout with the neatness of a person who likes lists. Mateo, she called. A stocky man at the range with shoulders like stacked cast iron grunted without looking. Mr. Goodwin is taking names. Don't give him recipes. My recipes are safe, Mateo Ruiz said, not amused. His knuckles were raw from scrubbing. A strip of blue tape held a cut closed on his ring finger. He didn't flinch when I looked at it, which counted for something. The steward, Pavel, was moving racks like a man who had spent his life under loads. His hands were clean and his eyes were tired. On a shelf near the dish pit, a small soft-sided cooler sat with its zipper half open. It was branded with a food purveyor I recognized, not a hospital, and contained vacuum bags of something vegetable and green. I let it be. You don't tag a man as a felon because he owns a cooler. You just notice he's got one. Branco, the sommelier without a last name, had a scarf knotted like it owed him money and was decanting a bottle into a carafe as if 6 people were watching. We are prepared for every palate, he told me, when nobody had asked. Even those who do not deserve it. Good, I said. Bring your palate at 8. Marta Kellerman was not in view. Crest volunteered that she came in when needed, which told me she was either being protected or avoiding flak. March kept his head turned toward a pot and said nothing. He had the concentration of a man who believed knives were for carving food and reputations. Back on the sidewalk, my phone buzzed. Saul didn't waste consonants. 7:05, staff entrance, a kid with a messenger bag and a blue cap. Same style you saw, arrived on a bicycle, handed something small and flat to Crest. Crest pocketed it. Not kitchen delivery. What did the kid hand him? Hard to tell. Not an envelope. Plastic case. Size of a CD if this were the 90s. Stick, I said. A thumb drive. Possibly. 718, alley. Miss Pike met a woman, 40-ish, hair in a scarf, long coat. No greeting. A pass, small paper. Short. The woman left northbound on foot. I'll get you better on her when she comes back. Marta, I said. Could be. I've only seen her in the paper. I'll confirm. I relayed to Wolfe when I got in. He listened, eyes narrowed, as if the details were grains and he was searching for a tiny pebble with poison on it. Crest with a device, he said. Miss Pike with a slip. Two streams of information, separate sources. Mr. Panzer will attempt to learn which is sewage and which is spring. Meanwhile, we will accommodate our visitor. What visitor? I asked, but it answered itself. The front bell rang, and then the soft slide on the vestibule rug told me somebody had come and gone without waiting for applause. I was there in 4 steps. On the tile lay an index card, the twin of the mornings, folded once. I took it in with 2 fingers. Same neat hand, same tone of a man who wants to be thanked after stabbing you through a curtain. You are too slow. It is not only blood. Ask him about Edda. After tonight you will understand why I cannot wait. I carried it back. Wolfe read it, and for once his lip moved in something almost like a baring of teeth. Impertinent, he said. He presumes to instruct. He knows about Edda, I said, which we learned an hour ago. He wishes to show us his intimacy with the facts, Wolfe said. He overreaches. Archie, call Mr. Markham. Ask him if, in addition to Edda, he detected any anticoagulants beyond the common salts, and ask whether the concentration suggested the blood had been in a tube, not a vein. I made the call. Markham, who didn't appreciate night work either, affirmed the Edda and added a trace of citrate, consistent with stored samples. Your cook is not the source, he said. Your saboteur likes refrigerators. Wolfe absorbed that, nodded once, and reached for the bell cord. 2 pulls. Fritz appeared, took in our faces, and vanished to return with beer. It was for not comfort but calculation. He poured. Wolfe didn't drink yet. Fred, he said when I'd summoned him to the hall, will remain on watch. You, Archie, will draft a note to Miss Pike and Mr. Crest. You will inform them that at 9 o'clock tomorrow, the jar will be delivered to the Department of Health. Unless I am convinced at 8, it is unnecessary. You will not send it. You will let it be read by Mr. Crest's eyes tonight. You want him to pass it on the stick, I said. He will, Wolfe said. The leisure of his malice depends on his estimate of ours. We will shorten his leash and lock that window. I latched the sash and set the dowel in the track. The jar behind the curtain sat like a king's head in a basket. Somewhere between the alley and the dining room, someone had decided they were done waiting for decency to catch up. If we were going to meet them in time, we had to make them hurry. At 8:30, I took Wolfe's note in an envelope with Serena's name on it and went back to Ravel. The room had warmed into its evening swagger. Crest saw me before I saw him and was already moving, which told me he'd decided I was worth intercepting. Miss Pike is occupied, he said. So am I said, and held out the envelope. Hand delivery per instruction. He took it with a graciousness that was 90 proof, glanced at the name and palmed it toward the host's stand as if it were one more reservation card. His pocket bulged on the right. Flat, plastic, the size Saul had predicted. He kept his wrist turned to hide it. He's good, Crest. He should save it for court one day. Serena, as it happened, was not so occupied she couldn't spot the exchange. She came off the pass with the look of a woman who can smell a secret 2 rooms away. For me? She asked. For us, I said. 8 o'clock is still 8 o'clock. That may spare you a flock of white coats and clipboards. Crest attempted to buffer. We don't conduct business in the dining room. You conduct everything in the dining room, I said, and left him to sort that sentence out. I didn't go far. The front glass gave me a reflection of Crest at the podium sliding the envelope under the book, then changing his mind and opening it with a thumbnail. Fast. He read Wolfe's 2 sentences, looked toward Serena, and did not hand it to her. He put it in his pocket with the plastic. That was fine. The stick would tell its own tale to whoever plugged it in later. The kitchen door swung on its little hinge, and for a second March framed the pass like a portrait. He saw me seeing him and pretended not to. Behind him, Matteo lifted a rondeau and set it down with a degree of care not entirely attributable to culinary pride. The steward, Pavel, moved past with a trash bag. It had a sound to it. Small, hard things knocking. Bones, probably. Or racks. I filed it and stepped out so I could breathe air that hadn't been curated. At 8:55, my phone hummed. Saul, blue cap kid again, out the front this time. Crest slipped him your envelope and the plastic. The kid didn't linger, heading east. Stay with him. Already am. I texted Fred to check the yard and the south wall. He gave me a thumbs-up emoji because the modern world has reached even Fred Durkin. 10 minutes later, he called instead of typing. Archie. Somebody tested the window again. Hooked a line on the latch and found they ain't in Kansas. When it wouldn't budge, they tried the coal chute cover. Then they walked. Blue cap. Face? Shadow. Skinny. Quick. I couldn't jump the fence without singing bass. But I got the shoes. Converse knockoffs. White stripe. I'll sit on it. Do. And keep sitting. Back at the brownstone, Wolfe listened to my report and half closed his eyes at the right places. Good, he said of Crest and the envelope. Mr. Panzer will see where the data flows. Mr. Durkin's persistence is sufficient. We will sleep. We will sit, I said. You sleep. I'll take a spell downstairs after midnight. Our caller likes the dark. He ignored that, which is consent by Wolfe's code. The phone rang before he could instruct me to keep my gun in a drawer. Kramer. The unlit cigar was down to the stub. Goodwin, your boy Wolfe lit a fuse somewhere? Only the kind that discourages explosions. Well, your senator puked on his shoes twice and is making noises about chemical assault. Health boys are sniffing at Ravel's garbage as we speak. If Wolfe's holding something and he lets me walk into a stink bomb tomorrow, I'll pipe gas into his orchids. I'll pass along your homey metaphor, I said. 8 a.m. Might fix your ulcer. Nothing fixes it. He hung up like a man completing a task he'd been made to do. Saul checked in at 10:20. Kid with the cap ducked into a co-working space on Lexington. Rented desk by the hour. Lots of glass. Bad coffee. He sat, plugged in, typed, uploaded something. I was close enough to see the screen, but not read it. He left the stick in a locker with a combination dial I can open in about 8 seconds if you want a civic discussion. No, I said, remembering Wolfe's edict about not being the first to corrupt. Stay with the kid. I did. He went 2 blocks, bought a hot dog, and then made a call I couldn't catch. He's back on the bike. If he circles Ravel again, I'll let you know. At 11, Fred called to say the alley was quiet, but somebody had scratched a mark in the mortar under the south window that hadn't been there at dusk. Looks like a little X, he said, like you'd mark a spot to come back to. They won't come back to this one, I said. We've moved the treasure? I did a sweep before midnight. The window was latched with the dowel in place. The jar behind the curtain might as well have been a statue for how still it sat. The office smelled faintly of Fritz's chives and of Wolfe's patience, which has an odor if you live with it. Something like ink and iron. At 12:15, Saul again. Your scarf woman, he said, confirmed Marta Kellerman. She left Ravel at 11:30 through the side door. No stop for air. Straight west to 9th, into a private clinic. After hours. Sign says they do travel vaccines and occupational health. She came out 20 minutes later with a small cooler bag, continued to a cab, and headed south. I've got the med address. I relayed it. Wolfe opened his eyes all the way. A clinic, he said. EDTA. Citrate. If Mrs. Kellerman is our conduit, she either has access or knows one who does. Archie, sleep 4 hours. At 6:30, you will be at that clinic's door with questions phrased as curiosity. You will learn whether they maintain a blood, draw service on premises, and whether Mrs. Kellerman is a client, donor, or patron. You will be benign, and you will be quick. Quick and benign, I said. It's my look. He turned his head toward the curtain and then away, as if granting the jar its night. "This is an abomination touched with vanity," he said. "The worst kind. We will end it in my office, not in the street." I set my alarm for 5:50 and lay down on the couch in the front room. The house was very still. Even the city outside had the decency to be quieter than usual, the way it sometimes is when it senses a noise coming in the morning that will be worse. The alarm did its nasty duty at 5:50. I shaved off the night and put on a suit that didn't scream inspector. And at 6:25, I was looking at a glass door with a tasteful decal, Hudson Travel and Occupational Health. The lights were on in the waiting room. A woman with a cardigan and a badge was arranging pamphlets about tetanus like they were a floral display. A man in scrubs went past with a tray of vials. The air smelled of antiseptic and coffee. "Good morning," the cardigan said, when I held the door. "We open at 7:30. "I'm early on purpose," I told her, with the smile I use for librarians and gatekeepers. "I'm doing a piece on how restaurants handle staff health, pre-employment screenings, vaccine compliance, that sort of thing. I've been pointed to you as the people who keep the hospitality industry solvent." I showed her a card with my name and no employer, which is a kind of truth. She absorbed the flattery like carbohydrates. "We do, yes. Drug testing, titers, fit for duty, travel. Are you with one of the trade magazines?" "Freelance," I said. "Archie Goodwin. I'll keep you anonymous unless you like seeing your name in print. Quick question. Do you handle service after hours for clients with schedules that aren't compatible with the sun?" "Sometimes," she said. She checked the clock. "Chefs and night staff, sure. By arrangement." "Last night," I said as if it had just occurred to me. "One of my restaurant sources said they had to run a blood draw after service. Tall woman with a scarf. Board member. She mentioned she knew someone here." The cardigan did a little blink at board. It was the right lever. "Mrs. Kellerman sits on our advisory board," she said, careful but not wary. "She sometimes facilitates access, if that's who you mean." "That's exactly who I mean," I said. "I'm trying to understand process. When you do an after-hours draw like that, is it kept on site before courier pickup, or does a client take custody? I don't want to write something that makes you look sloppy." "We are never sloppy," she said, "which is what good people say right before they tell you where the mop closet is. We hold in a locked refrigerator until courier, unless it's an employer. Chain of custody, where their designated representative takes the sealed kit to a lab." "Chain of custody," I repeated, admiring. "And Mrs. Kellerman is sometimes that representative?" "She is authorized for certain clients," she said. "Sir, if you're going to write, I'll let you see the paragraphs with your name scratched out," I promised. "One more. Who would have drawn last night?" She hesitated. A door opened. Scrubs came back, a woman with capable hands and a ponytail, the tray now empty. I recognized the lavender tops in the discard bin behind her, Edta Vacutaners, same family as Markham's lecture. The ponytail clocked me as non-threatening and then as business. "I'm Rima," she said. "If you want process, talk to me. We're closed, but if you're quick." I was quick. Restaurants, after hours, Mrs. Kellerman, chain of custody. Rima made the face of a person who has said the same speech to the same client and found it gets ignored every time. "We did 2 kits late," she said. "Employer series. Baseline titers and CBC. Mrs. Kellerman signed as employer representative. I drew, sealed, signed. She took custody. We logged the time. Courier would have been faster in the morning. She wanted them overnight." "Employer," I said. "Which employer?" "I don't disclose clients," she said, but it had the tone of habit, not defiance. I nodded. "Do employers often use their board members as runners?" "She's not a runner," Rima said, loyal. "She's here because she supports what we do. She knows how to handle a sealed kit. Besides, she specifically asked me to use citrate tubes for one of them, which most folks don't care about. She knew what she was asking." Blue tops, I said, and she looked at me with new interest. You do your homework. I fake it, I said. Did you do any routine blood bag handling last night? Donations? Anything that would have you using CPD or handling stored blood? Not here, she said with a small shudder. We do vaccines. We don't store blood. Anybody else here after hours besides you and Mrs. Kellerman? Front desk, Tina, for 15 minutes, Remus said, nodding toward the cardigan. Then just me and Mrs. K. She let herself out. Is she authorized to access the refrigerators alone? I asked it as if the answer would be, of course not. She has keys, Remus said. Bored. Don't print that. I'm not writing names, I said, and meant it. Last, have you had any inventory issues? Missing vials? Seals broken after hours? Never, Remus said, and then a tiny cloud passed her face. Once last month a box of lavender tops was out of place. We thought housekeeping moved it. It turned up. It's been fine. I thanked them, palmed Tina's jar of charity lollipops with $1, and checked the wall behind the desk like a man who admires HVAC permits. The business license had the name of the corporate owner, Kellerman Workplace Health, LLC. If I'd been betting, I'd have lost on subtlety. I was back in the brown chair at 7:45. Wolfe came down at 8 on the dot, as he does for emergencies in the opera, and mounted his throne while I briefed. He listened without interrupting, which is either consent or the laying of a trap. So, he said when I finished, Mrs. Kellerman possesses access to blood specimens, knowledge of anticoagulants, and a convenient altruistic pretext. She left last night with sealed kits, and there was a transfer to Mr. Crest of something he preferred to copy and disseminate. Mr. Panzer. Saul arrived with coffee breath at 8:04, which for Saul is modestly late. Kid with the cap slept 4 hours on a couch at the co-working joint. Woke, checked on his locker twice, left at 6, delivered the stick to a man in a black Hyundai at 38th and Park. The Hyundai belongs to a public relations boutique that handles crisis communications. The man's name is Vince Peretti. Wolfe's eyebrows climbed a rung. Crisis, he said. Miss Pike is prudent, but this has a different odor. The boutique's clients include 2 restaurant groups and 1 senator, Saul added. We didn't get to taste that because the front bell went. 8 o'clock had come with bodies. I stationed myself to receive. Serena led, composed but hotter at the edges. March had his whites under a jacket as if he'd fought sleep in them. Crest's smile had spent the night in a drawer and hadn't woken up yet. Mateo came with a jaw set to grind. Dana had rewrapped the finger and was daring anyone to pity it. Branko, scarfed and scented. Pavel, clean and worried, and Marta Kellerman, in the same long coat Saul had described, looking like a woman for whom access was a sacrament. They filed in and took air from the room. Wolfe did not welcome them. He let the office welcome them, which it does. The books, the scale of a man in a chair, the sense that if you lied here, the ceiling would drop 2 inches in rebuke. Sit, he said. You know why. Serena started to speak. He lifted a finger, a small movement with the power of a stoplight. No, he said. First, I will state what I know. Then you will correct me where I am wrong. Then you will answer my questions, because if you do not, other men will ask less polite ones with less discretion. Miss Pike, please do not interrupt me with protestations of reputational fragility. Mr. March, do not tell me what is and is not possible in kitchens. Mr. Crest, you are forbidden to smile. Crest's mouth shut as if it had been told there were rats in it. I settled with my notepad. Fritz, on a signal, shut the door. The latch clicked for the house and for the case. Wolfe inclined his head an inch, and the examination began. Wolfe began with a jar and did not embellish. A sealed sample from your course 5, verified to contain human hemoglobin preserved with EDTA and citrate. Not a kitchen cut, a specimen. Within an hour of its arrival here, someone attempted, from outside, to manipulate objects in this room through the south window with monofilament. We prevented it. Last night, a blue-capped courier exchanged with Mr. Crest a plastic device and, later, departed with an envelope addressed to Miss Pike. Mrs. Kellerman visited a clinic after hours and departed with sealed blood draw kits in her custody. The Department of Health is poised. You're here because I choose to conduct the necessary inquiries under my roof. Silence seated itself on top of the 7 chairs. Serena had the spine for it. Ask. Mrs. Kellerman, Wolfe said, voice even, did you take custody of any blood specimens last night? Marta met him head on. I signed out 2 employer chain kits, routine baseline, it's common. For which employer? Our holding company, she said. Proactive screening for food handlers. I've been pushing for it. Names, Wolfe said. Her glance slid toward March and then back. Dana North and Mateo Ruiz. New role definitions require updated documentation. Dana didn't flinch. I bled a vial. So what? Mateo's jaw worked. Same. If this is about hygiene, I pass. It is not about hygiene, Wolfe said. He turned to March. Your reduction. How many hands could have touched the pan or the service pitcher between preparation and plating for the private room? March's lips thinned. Mine. Mateo's, if he reached for a towel. Dana's, if she had the station. No one else. Mr. Crest, Wolfe said without turning. The device you received. Crest opened his palms. A menu update. We keep media on hand in case press requests. No, Wolfe said, so flat it cut. You delivered it to a firm whose business is panic. For whom were you preparing to panic? Crest's smile twitched and died. I am prudent. A senator vomits. A rumor flies. We prepare statements. That is my job. Your job, Wolfe said, is to arrange chairs and flatter strangers. You prepared to manage a crisis you did not yet know existed. How? Serena fielded it like a linebacker. Lionel anticipates. I told him we might have trouble. The senator's staff called me at 8 this morning. Before or after Mr. Crest's device was relayed? Wolfe asked. She paused, calculated, chose truth. Before. Very well, Wolfe said. Mr. Ruiz, your hands. Mateo held them up. The blue tape was new. Cut on a tub edge. Before service, bandaged. No leak. Miss North, your injury at 6, Wolfe said. Paring knife, thumbnail nick, Dana said. Etienne threw a fit like I'd bled on the Pope. We tossed the board, sanitized. I stepped off for an hour. Mr. Pavel, Wolfe said. You're garbage. Pavel looked like he'd rather lift the desk than answer a question, but he answered. Bones, peels, boxes. I take it to the alley. No one touches it but me and the rats. Wolfe accepted that with a nod. Branco. Branco lifted a brow. I pair wine. I do not season sauces. You pair gossip, Wolfe said. In the private room, did any plate return to the pass? Branco thought. 1, course 5, the senator's aide. Too rich, she said. We replated. Was the sauce on that first plate discarded? Wolfe asked March. Of course, March said, stung. We do not recycle. Good, Wolfe said. He let a beat pass. Someone has chosen a vehicle, the reduction, for their theater. They drew blood through lawful means, preserved it, carried it, and introduced it. That person is linked to Mrs. Kellerman's convenienced access, Mr. Crest's appetite for managed scandal, and the kitchen's choreography. Serena's voice was quiet. You think it's one of us? I know it is, Wolfe said. Only you have motive adequate to risk ruin, to unseat, to acquire, to avenge. An outsider could not have known where to pour. Marta leaned forward. You think I stole from my own clinic to poison my own restaurant? I think, Wolfe said. You think in terms of systems, not plates. If you desired to compel a change, ownership, leadership, you would engineer pressure, but I do not accuse you yet. His gaze shifted. Mr. Crest, explain why you withheld Mr. Goodwin's note from Miss Pike. Crest blinked. Serena's head turned. You had a note. I read it, Crest said smoothly, the smile almost back. I intended to brief you after service. After, Wolfe said delicately, you had made a copy and distributed it. Serena's eyes were not cool now. Lionel, he lifted a shoulder. Information starves in one place and has a feast in another. If the department bursts in, we need allies. Vince has journalists on leashes. And on chains, Wolfe said. Miss North, who else knew of the private tasting? Staff, she said, plus whoever Lionel told. Crest's hands fluttered. Reservations require coordination. Enough, Wolfe said, and it was. He leaned back, eyelids lowered. When he spoke again, the tone had shifted, the way you hear a key change in music before you can hum it. One more matter. Yesterday and again last night, someone attempted to reach into this room with a line through the south window. An amateur fisherman tried to tug at a jar he should never have known existed. They were good. None of them gasped. But two heads moved not at the word jar, but at line, marches, a fraction as if tasting wrong methodology, and Pavel's, a flinch like a man who knows what a monofilament feels like when it slices skin. Do any of you fish? Wolfe inquired, mild as milk. Silence. March sniffed. I have neither time nor interest. Mateo shrugged. My brother, not me. Pavel, Wolfe said. Pavel shook his head. No, sir. Branko, Wolfe said. I fish for tips, Branko said, which was the wrong joke for the wrong moment. Fritz opened the door to admit air and, uninvited, Inspector Kramer's voice from the vestibule. He didn't wait for the pageant. He came in with a folder and a temper. Wolfe. Health boys found a DTA in the garbage at Ravel. Empty vacutainer tops in a kitchen bin. You want to tell me why I'm at your tea party instead of putting cuffs on a line cook? Because, Wolfe said without looking at him, you would choose the wrong wrists. He shifted his gaze to Serena. Miss Pike, I require from you now the list of who knew Mrs. Kellerman would make her draws last night and who had unsupervised access to the private room's plating path. Mr. Goodwin. Yes. Bring in the envelope from your desk. I did, and he did not open it. He set it where they could all see it and then ignored it. This, he said, determines whether I call the department before 9. If any of you prefer their questions to mine, speak. Otherwise, I will proceed. No one spoke. Wolfe let the weight sit until it pressed. Then he pointed a finger as casually as a man indicating the salt. Mrs. Kellerman, who, besides you, knew there would be blood draws last night. Her eyes stayed level. Tina at the desk, Rima who drew, that is all. And at Ravel, Wolfe said. Who knew? Me, Serena said. Etienne, once I told him after the senator's office called. Nobody before that. Crest parted his lips. Serena cut him with a look. He shut them again. Wolfe turned his head a fraction. Mr. Crest, do you keep monofilament line in your front-of-house supplies? Crest tried to be blank. It wasn't his best look. For florals, for the chandelier installs. It's invisible. Every place uses it. Do you keep a spool? Wolfe said. Yes, Crest said, in the credenza by the coat checks and in the event box. And who has access to that? Wolfe asked. Me, the hosts. Anyone with hands. Crest said testy. Mr. Wolfe, what is this? Wolfe's eyes drifted to the envelope on his desk like a cat's eyes drift to a bird, then away. An indulgence, he said. Mr. Durkin found a filament thread on my window latch. It is materially indistinguishable from what you keep in your credenza. He lifted a hand an inch to forestall the rebuttal. Yes, indistinguishable is not identification. It is, however, taste. And you, Mr. Crest, have been tasting too many things. Crest's chin went up. You can't prove that line is mine. I do not need to, Wolfe said. I only need to demonstrate that you, having learned last night that Mr. Goodwin delivered a sealed sample to me, urgently wished to know whether I had preserved it. Your blue-capped Mercury tested my window twice. He failed. You then supplied a crisis communications firm with the context, either the envelope you stole from Miss Pike or your own account. Kramer's cigar gnawed at his lip. Which one of you genius restaurateurs put vacutainer tops in the kitchen bin? Marta didn't even turn to him. Not me. Of course not you, Kramer snapped. You're a philanthropist. Wolfe ignored him. Mr. Ruiz, in your station, do you keep any vessels that would have held a reduction off the heat while plates were dressed? Mateo's nostrils flared. 2 small sauciers on a low flame? And a third, Dana said before she could decide not to. For the private room, Etienne keeps one aside when we're plating VIPs. March's glare would have cooked an egg. I do not keep aside, he said. I control. It is not the same. No? Wolfe asked. Describe your plating for the private room, the path from pan to plate. March's voice went clipped, performing. Reduce to nappe. Nap on the meat. 1 spoon, edge wiped, garnish. Plate up. Runner to the private room. Which runner? Wolfe asked. Whoever is free, March said. Usually folk. Ms. North hates to let them touch plates, I insist. Dana's jaw set. Because they are clumsy. Because they are quick, March snapped. Mr. Wolfe, if you want to accuse, do it. I have already told you I am not accusing, Wolfe said, silk over wire. I am analyzing incentives. Miss Pike, your partnership agreement. What provision is triggered by public health closure? Serena's hands, loose on her knees, tightened once and relaxed. There is a material adverse event clause. If we are closed by order for more than 72 hours, management control passes temporarily to a designated fiduciary, Marta, until compliance is restored. Temporarily, Marta said, a touch too fast. To prevent loss. And upon restoration, Wolfe continued, what, and he put iron in the word, determines restoration? Who certifies that? The board, Marta said. It is routine governance. Routine, Wolfe murmured. With one hand you open refrigerators, with the other you collect keys. She flushed for the first time. My intention is to protect the asset. By contaminating it, Dana blurted. She hates that Etienne refuses the brunch program. She's said it for months. She wants volume. Marta rounded. I want solvency. Do not pretend passion is a business model. Enough, Serena said, quiet, hot. If anyone engineered this to oust anyone, they did it over my dead capital. That can be arranged, Branco murmured, and then regretted it when all eyes passed over him like a harrow. He sat back and found interest in his own cuff. Wolfe's lids lowered. We arrive at motives. To unseat Mr. March, to seize control, to inflate a crisis and ride it. Means access to preserved blood. Knowledge that EDTA would resist coagulation long enough to be detected. Discretion to add without observation. Opportunity, momentary, at the pass or in the path to the private room. Kramer shifted. You left out malice. I accounted for it under appetite, Wolfe said. Now, Miss North, while you were off station with your cut, who stood meat? Etienne, Dana said. He wouldn't let Mateo touch it. And when you returned, Wolfe asked, did you find any tool misplaced? Any towel you hadn't folded out of habit? She opened her mouth to say no and then stopped. The spoon, she said slowly. My tasting spoon. I wipe and keep it left of the board. It was on the right. I thought, nothing. We were slammed. Who would use it? Wolfe asked. Her eyes flicked to March and away. Etienne, or Mateo, or Lionel if he were being helpful. Crest spread his fingers. I don't taste sauces. You taste photographers, March said coldly. And senators. Crest leaned forward. Etienne, if anyone wanted you out, they would not paint with a brush that slops on to all of us. That depends, Wolfe said, on whether they expect to survive the splash. He focused on Pavel with a suddenness that made the steward's throat jump. Mr. Pavel, before service began, who entered the kitchen unauthorized. No one unauthorized, Pavel said, but many authorized when they shouldn't. The front people. Mr. Crest comes and goes. Mrs. Kellerman sometimes. Marta's nostrils flared. I tour. Investors tour. Not during pass, March said. You don't go near my pass. I do not go near your ego either, she snapped. Wolfe lifted a hand. A question of timing. Mrs. Kellerman, at what hour did you go to the clinic? 11:30, she said, as your man must have told you, since we are trading observations like recipes. And at what hour did you arrive at Ravel with a slip of paper for Miss Pike? Wolfe asked. 8, she said, a health checklist for the senator's team. Their demands change by the hour. Which you hand-delivered, Wolfe said, to the alley. I avoid the paparazzi, she said. Paparazzi, Kramer said under his breath. For a bistro. Wolfe ignored him. Mr. Panzer. Saul stepped in from the hall like he had been waiting for his cue. Because he had. The kid with the blue cap is outside, he said. He thinks he's delivering another stick. He thinks wrong unless you want him. Bring him, Wolfe said. Crest sat straighter and then remembered the order forbidding him to smile. He worked on his expression and achieved blankness. Saul went and returned with a kid who would have passed for a violin student if he'd had a case. Blue cap, cheap shoes, the haircut of a man whose mother had opinions. He took in the room and decided it was a bad place to be young in. Name, Kramer barked. Evan, he said. This is just runs. For whom? Kramer asked. Evan looked at me. Kids always look at me. I practice not being a cop. For Mr. Crest. Crest's head tilted. No, for the restaurant. You're a third-party rider, he told Kramer, polite to the badge. We hire from an app. He doesn't work for me. Yesterday, Wolfe said to Evan, you left a jar on my steps. Evan shook his head immediately. Too fast. No, sir. I only deliver sticks, thumb drives, and cards. The jar was some other guy. Cards, Wolfe said. Index cards. Evan swallowed. Sometimes. Someone gives me the thing and an address. I don't ask. You said no cops. I did not, Wolfe said. Mr. Crest did. Mr. Crest, your device last night. What did you send? Crest's palms spread. Menu language, then a scenario plan in case of closure. Draft responses, Wolfe said. Including what? Precisely. We take allegations seriously. We are cooperating. The safety of our guests is paramount. Crest recited. Bored. That's the catechism. And who wrote the allegation? Wolfe asked. You had it before I spoke to you. Crest's face showed enough of the truth to convict him of vanity. Anonymous tip, he said. It came to the press email. I didn't want to alarm anyone till I had a plan. Serena's voice went dry as chalk. You had a plan before you had a problem. I had a plan because we always have problems, he said. Ask Kramer. Wolfe turned back to Evan. The index cards, the last one you left. Where did it come from? Evan licked his lips. A woman. Hair scarf. Long coat. She gave cash. Said it was for the big man on 35th. She said not to ring unless I saw a man with a hat. Every head swung to Marta. She didn't blink. Lots of women wear scarves, she said. Lots of coats are long. Describe the scarf, I said. Dark, he said. Little white squares. Saul, who forgets nothing, didn't look. He just said, matches. Marta's jaw tightened. I have a scarf. That isn't a crime. No, Wolfe said. This is not a crime scene. Not yet. It is the threshold. He rested his fingertips together. We have, then, your conduit to the clinic, your courier to the street, your line to my window, your crisis manager with a leash in one hand and a stick in the other. Mr. March, your kitchen pride made you predictable. They counted on that. Mr. Ruiz, your endurance made you blind to anything not flame and steel. Miss North, your injury gave an interloper a pretext to hover. Mr. Branco, your preening kept you out of the useful parts. Mr. Pavel, your fear kept you silent. Miss Pike, your confidence in your team will either save you or ruin you depending on how quickly you relinquish it. Kramer made an impatient noise. If you have a name, say it. I have two, Wolfe said. He opened his eyes all the way. But the second is a dependent, Claus. His gaze traveled from Crest to Marta and back, like a metronome that ticks on someone's pulse. Mr. Crest planned to ride a wave he had not himself generated. Mrs. Kellerman generated it, if I am wrong, and his voice sharpened. Tell me who else both possessed preserved blood and the will to pour it. Marta's lips parted, but it was Crest who broke first. Do not let him crucify you, he said to her, softly, urgently. He will call health, he will scorch us. If you talk to him here, maybe it dies in this room. Serena turned her head to him, and something had left her eyes that I hadn't seen depart before. Lionel, she said, if you were in this. I was not, he said quickly, which will never again mean what it used to between them. Wolfe did not look at Serena. He looked at Marta. A last opportunity, he said. Identify the vessel into which you poured. If you do, I will argue for administrative handling. If you do not, Inspector Kramer will take you now, and the senator will have your scalp in a committee room. You cannot govern an asset from a cell. The room had stopped breathing. The envelope on the desk sat like a small door you could choose to open or not. Marta's fingers flexed on the arm of her chair. She looked at March as if he were a problem in arithmetic, at Serena like a ledger, at Crest like damage control. Then she looked at the curtain, and I saw it, the tiny, involuntary reach of her eyes toward the exact spot where the jar sat behind it. You could call it nothing. Wolfe called it enough. Archie, he said, without moving his head, the Department of Health. Her lips twitched. Wait, she said. You don't have to. Kramer had his hand on his phone before mine could find a number. Wolfe didn't raise his voice. Miss Pike, he said, rescind Mr. Crest's authority to speak for Ravel in any capacity. Mr. March, keep your men out of rooms except your kitchen. Mr. Crest, stay in your chair. Mrs. Kellerman, stop choosing. Choose. She chose to stand, which was not the choice he had offered. 2 steps took her toward the window and the curtain. She had a hand out before she remembered there was a room watching that hand. I was already there. I didn't touch her. I reached past and pinched the drape shut. She stopped and looked at her palm as if it belonged to someone else. Everything is always so manageable, she said, not to us, until a man like you refuses to be managed. Wolfe inclined his head. You may console yourself, he said, with the thought that I am not a man like most. She stood with her hand cooling in the air and her eyes on a curtain she wasn't going to get. Wolfe let the quiet run 5 seconds and then ended mercy. You did not pour into a pan, he said. You poured into a vessel kept aside for the private room, a small saucière at the pass. You used a vacutainer and a disposable pipette from your kit. You disposed of the tops in a kitchen bin because you do not handle trash often enough to know where to hide it. You timed it for the senator's course, assuming a reaction sufficient to prompt inspection and a graceful, temporary closure under the board's clause. You then sent an index card to summon me as cudgel and insurance. When you realized you had introduced a criminal element that could be proved in a jar, you tried to take it back by fishing through my window. Marta did not flinch at the sequence. She saved all her movement for one word. Criminal, she said. It wasn't, Mr. Wolfe, it was sterile. It was a drop. It wouldn't hurt anyone. It was a symbol. Kramer's bark clipped the air. Lady, you don't get to decide what hurts when you serve people blood. Wolfe did not look at him. Symbols belong on paper, not plates. Serena's voice had lost the frost and found heat. Is this true? Marta sat. She folded her hands on her knees like a woman in church and turned them palm up an inch. Serena, she said, very level, I have watched your cash burn while your genius plated garnishes. We were 4 weeks from a breach. I could not get you to see it. Etienne would not budge. I needed leverage that did not look like me. A health pause, 48 hours, would let me reset schedules, renegotiate vendors, install brunch. We would have survived. March made a sound that was almost a laugh and almost a groan. Brunch, he said. You wanted to bleed my sauce to sell eggs. She turned on him. I wanted to keep your room open, chef. And if the senator hadn't merely been queasy, Kramer said, but had a condition, anticoagulants, allergies, you'd have your closure and a homicide. She kept her eyes on Serena. I used a tiny quantity. EDTA is inert in a volume. It is not inert ethically, Wolfe said, light as silk on a wire. And your quantities were not so tiny that my chemist missed them among bones and butter. You meant it to be found. I meant it to be noticed, she said, with the flint coming through at last. Noise wakes sleepers. Then why try to steal the jar? I asked. Her gaze flicked to me, and if I'd had less practice, I would have looked away. Because you were not going to let it be mere noise, she said. You were going to make it proof. Crest's breath came out like a laugh that wished it was smoke. Marta, he said softly, you absolute amateur. Her head swung. You, she said, and now the pronoun had teeth. You had one job. Manage. You started a panic cycle before I'd even placed the piece. You asked Vince to prepare statements that would have us sounding guilty before anyone asked a question. It was coming anyway, Crest said. The senator's staff called at 8. That was not me. I did not pour your theater on their plates. Enough, Serena said, and she stood too, but, unlike Marta, hers was a rise no one tried to stop. She faced the room and distributed her decisions. Lionel, you're finished. Give Archie your phone and the passwords for every account that mentions Ravel. Now. Marta, sit down, don't move. Etienne, sit, no one moves. Wolfe's forefinger drew a small circle over the arm of his chair, a private approval. He returned to the task, precise. You will specify the vessel, he told Marta again. Which saucier? She pressed her lips into a thin line, the line you draw when deciding between two bad doors. The third, she said, the one Dana keeps left of the burners when we do special plates. It's the only one that sits level. Dana closed her eyes once. I hated that you know that, she said without heat. Wolfe inclined his head. Inspector, you will find residues in that vessel unless vigorous washing intervened. Your men may already have them in their bags. He shifted to Serena. The health department will come. Invite them. Do not wait to be compelled. Close voluntarily for 3 days. Feed no one. Cooperate loudly. Announce that Mr. Crest is no longer in your employ and that Mrs. Kellerman has tendered her resignation pending review. Mr. March will remain chef, but he will submit to an independent audit of kitchen protocols. Serena didn't look away. If I do that, you keep this in a room and not on a front page. I do nothing of the sort, Wolfe said calmly. I keep nothing. I will provide the department with what they require. But my telling of it, to whom and how, depends on whether you seize your responsibility. I have no hunger to be your herald. I am hungry to end an abomination in a kitchen. Kramer was already on his feet, and so were the veins in his neck. We're not bargaining, he said. She's coming. Wolfe lifted a hand. You will have her, Inspector. But you will not have a perp walk to a camera with a senator's name on it before Miss Pike says her piece, if I can help it. Kramer grunted something like consent with thorns. He looked at Marta. "You're lucky the old man likes kitchens more than headlines." Evan, who had spent the last 3 minutes trying to atomize, squeaked, "Can I go?" Saul answered for the world. "You can sit." He eased the kid back into his chair with a pressure that would dissuade a better man than Evan. Wolfe was not done with the line through his window. "Who brought you the monofilament?" he asked the boy without looking at Crest. Evan glanced reflexively toward the wrong salvation. "The man at the podium," he said. "He said the old man had something that didn't belong to him. He said it would be simple." Crest's hands opened in a gesture that would have sold sunset to monks. "Mr. Wolfe, if I intended to burgle your museum, I would not have hired a child with a bicycle." "You did not intend to burgle," Wolfe said. "You intended to test, to see if the prize was there and if you could take it later. Your province is rehearsals." He swung his gaze. "Miss North, one matter more. After your cut, while you were off the station, who came and stood where you stand?" "Etienne," she said. "For an hour." "And who tried to help?" he pressed. She swallowed. "Lionel. He brought plates to the pass and touched the spoon. I smacked his hand." Crest shrugged. "I tried to speed service." "You opened a lane," Wolfe said, "for a woman with a board badge and a scarf." Marta's shoulders sagged once, then caught themselves. "Are you quite satisfied?" she asked Wolfe, the last reserves of hauteur on ration. "No," he said. "I am only satisfied when a plate is right." "Inspector." Kramer came around the sofa. If he'd had cuffs out, the click would have been loud, but he held them back by a notch. "Marta Kellerman, you're coming with me. We'll talk about contamination, public health, intent. You can bring counsel. Try the word symbol and see how far it throws." She stood again, straighter, and turned once toward Serena, who did not offer anything back. It wasn't cruelty. It was arithmetic. Saul moved when she did, a gentleman's shadow. Evan stayed seated because he had learned how staying seated feels. Crest had his phone out under his thigh. I kicked his chair lightly and held out my hand. He surrendered the rectangle with an expression you would call wounded if you hadn't watched him all morning. "Passcodes," Serena said, and he gave them to me because there are techniques besides knives for opening a man's phone. Wolfe reached for the bell cord and did not pull it. "Before you depart," he told Marta, "answer one thing to satisfy me, if not the law. Why me? Why not the department first?" She hesitated, then chose a small truth. "Because you are fast," she said, "and because you are precise. Health closes and waits. You cut." "And you thought," Wolfe said, "that I would cut only the part you pointed at." "I thought," she said, and now there was genuine surprise, "that you would be on my side because you hate sloppiness." He closed his eyes and opened them. "I hate deceit," he said. "Sloppiness is a symptom. Deceit is a sin. Go." They went, Kramer with his folder, Saul with his kid, Marta with her coat and her scarf that would be a detail in someone's column by noon. When the door closed, the office did not return to normal. It never does immediately after you've had 12 people breathe ambition at it. Serena sat back down slowly, as if the chair had not yet decided to accept any more bodies. March didn't move. He looked carved. Mateo rolled his shoulders once, a long reset. Dana found her cut with her thumb and then stopped, ashamed of the habit. Branco gazed at a point on the wall as if there were a mirror there. "Instructions," Wolfe said, as if the kitchen were his brigade. "Miss Pike, telephone the health department and invite them, then the senator's chief of staff. You will say you are closing voluntarily and cooperating fully, and that no medical harm has been determined. You will not say the word ed te. Mr. March, you will prepare a written protocol for discards and bandage handling that even an imbecile could follow. You will not mention artistry. Mr. Ruiz, you will supervise the sanitization of every vessel, with photography. Miss North, you will inventory every piece of equipment that leaves your station. Mr. Branco, you will stay out of the way." Serena nodded once, a deep acknowledgement that owes and pays. "And Lionel," she said to me. "Will hand me every code we haven't thought of," I said. He did. It didn't make him shorter. Wolfe finally pulled the bell. Fritz came with beer. Wolfe accepted a glass, looked at it, did not drink. He regarded Serena. "You have been wounded," he said, "by someone who believed she was the surgeon. You may heal if you refuse to let amateurs operate again." Serena's mouth made a shape that might someday be a smile. "You think I will forgive you when this is over?" "I do not require it," Wolfe said. "I am not one of your diners." She stood. "Thank you," she said, and it was not pleasant. It was exact. "We will do as you say." She looked at March. "Etienne, stay. We have to talk after I call health." He inclined his head, and for once it looked like capitulation and not courtesy. They filed out in parts. The room hollowed. Wolfe watched the curtain, then me. "You will take the jar to the department," he said. "You will mention Markham's test. You will not mention the clinic until Inspector Kramer does. When you return, we will draft a letter to Mr. Peretti of the boutique advising him he will not speak of Ravel without Miss Pike's consent, or he will find his client's list diminished by one senator." "I enjoy you when you're full," I said. "I am not full," he said, and now he drank. "I am merely not hungry for that." I gathered the jar, still cold from the dowel's shadow. On my way out, the south window winked in the morning sun. I tapped the sash. Locked. In a house like ours, you count that as a victory. Outside, a city with a senator and a scandal had begun to boil. We stepped into it with a basket and a lid. I got the jar to the department, and a man with an ID badge and an expression you would call rules gave me a receipt and a look that said he would prefer I stop existing. I gave him Markham's note on Aditya and citrate without naming Markham and left him to find out what we already knew. On the way back, my phone did lapse. Kramer first. He had Marta at the precinct with counsel, and the counsel had the thankless job of arguing that theatrical intent made adulteration less criminal. Then Serena. Health had returned her call and accepted the voluntary closure. She had said the words Wolfe gave her, and none he didn't. Then Saul. The boutique had pulled the plug on any statements until stakeholder alignment, which is agency for "we don't want to be anywhere near this." Lionel had not returned Saul's last text because Lionel no longer had a phone anyone cared about. Back at the house, Wolfe had not moved, and nothing else had either. I gave him the receipt and the color commentary. He said "pfui" once, not at me, but at the condition of civic nerves. At 11:10, Health called my office line, which is how you know Serena had not tried to keep them in her pocket. Their preliminary swab on the third saucier, Dana's, lit for Edta like a Christmas ornament. Their lab would need to confirm, yes, but they pronounced the word confirm, the way you pronounce inevitable. They also wanted to know what lunatic thought a private citizen should be handed a jar of food evidence. I told them the lunatic had a license in everything but patience, and they said to send him their regards from a distance. At noon, Inspector Kramer called to say that Marta's counsel had argued her down from manslaughter and up to attempted adulteration of a consumer product with reckless endangerment on the side. "She's lucky she wrote her own confession with your soundtrack," he said. "If she tries to wriggle, I'll refer her to that long coat and the clinic receipts." "And Crest?" I asked. "Trying out new metaphors for unemployment," he said. "We're looking at tampering with evidence. Your window, if I can get the kid to say the right words. The kid's mother has said more words than either of them." "How about the senator?" "Alive, ugly, and likely to be grandstanding by 4. Kramer said. "He'll be fine. He wasn't poisoned. He was fed. There's a difference." Sol checked in after lunch. Vince Peretti had sent a note in reply to my letter, all offended professionalism and a pledge to stand down. Sol also, because he is thorough, had taken a stroll past Ravel and watched a city's appetite walk face first into a paper sign and pivot to another door. "They'll be back," he said. "New York likes scars on a restaurant. Shows character." By 3, the day had begun to stop doing tricks. Health had sent a team to Ravel with hats and clipboards. I rang Serena to ask whether my name would be printed on any list that included collaborator. She laughed without amusement. "No," she said. "You will be a shadow we pretend not to see." "Wolfe prefers it that way," I said. By 4, the front door opened and let in a gust of reality in the shape of Etienne Marche. He had something in a paper bag and set it on my desk as if he were giving me back my hat. "Fritz," he said with ceremony, "may use this if he wishes." The bag held a jar of pimenton and a second jar with no label at all. March saw my glance and sniffed. "Veal stock," he said. "Clean." "For your house?" I saw the jar there, and he flicked his eyes toward the south bookcase and the spice tray, and I recognized a man's house when it asks for respect. Fritz came to the door of the office in a way that made you think he had been born in a doorway, accepted the jars as if they were treaties, and inclined at March with more generosity than he gives most chefs. "It is not necessary," he said, "but it is correct." Wolfe didn't thank March. He doesn't do thank yous except to orchids and occasionally to Terry Sanford's cattle. He told March that if he insisted on raspberries in his demi-glace, he should at least admit it publicly. March did not deign to reply, which is as close to friendship as those two will come. At 5, the health lab called again. Confirmation on their side. They would be issuing a bulletin without adjectives. Wolfe nodded once at nothing and asked Fritz to begin dinner. At 6:40, Serena telephoned a last time. She had stood in her own dining room at 4 and told the senator's chief of staff that Ravel was closed. She had called a board meeting and asked them to appoint a temporary fiduciary who was not Marta. She had told Dana and Matteo to go home and come back in 2 days ready to scrub. She had called a locksmith. "You were right," she said. "Speed and precision, we may survive." "You will if you continue to do what you loathe," Wolfe said. "What's that?" she asked. "Consider consequences before appetites," he said, and she hung up because he was right and she was busy. We ate at 7. Fritz sent out a consommé you could read through and lamb chops that met their end with grace. There was no blood. Wolfe poured beer and did not attempt irony. We did not speak about Ravel at the table. That is one of the house rules. The kitchen is for joy. The office is for trouble. After coffee, I stretched my legs and went to the office and put my hand under the south curtain where the sash sat snug. The dowel was still in its groove. Outside, the mortar had a new line in it. Fred had scratched his initials where the X had been. On my desk, the index cards, the notes from our friend of the truth, sat in a stack with a rubber band. I considered pitching them. Wolfe doesn't keep souvenirs of folly. He keeps records. I slid them into the file. He came in with the inertia of a battleship deciding to move and took his chair. It settled around him like a throne deciding to be a chair after all. He looked at me for a long second without saying anything, which is what he does when he has built a structure and is checking for cracks. "Well," I said, "no brunch." He made a face at the word, an expression I've seen him reserve for canned mushrooms and public men. "The meal is not to blame," he said. "It is the excuse." I said, "You know you may have saved March from genius. If he has to write a protocol and photograph a pot, he might turn into a man." "He is a man," Wolfe said. "He must remember he is not a god." "Serena will run it," I said. with both eyes open and one hand on the tiller and the other on the checkbook. "Good," he said. "If she fails, she cannot say she was not warned." "And Marta?" I asked. "She will bargain," he said. "They always bargain when they have used a principle as a cudgel. The law will take a bite and leave enough of her so she can learn to keep her symbols off people's plates." "And Crest?" "Obsolescence," he said. "He mistook his function. A maitre d' who believes he can manage a crisis is like a waiter who believes he can season a sauce at the table." "You've seen that," I said. "I have left restaurants where I have seen that," he said. We let the house be silent for a minute. The jar was gone. The window was locked. The office had been washed clean with talk. Everything bad that had been in the brownstone had left with people wearing coats. That is one of the better endings available in this line of work. He put his fingertips together and looked at them as if they were a puzzle with the solution already written in. "You asked me yesterday," he said, "why it mattered if the note was true." "I did," I said. "You answered with pride." "I did," he agreed. It was also appetite. The kitchen is sacred because it feeds man when he is most vulnerable, when he is willing to put something inside his body because someone tells him it is good. To betray that is to mock trust. I do not permit that in my house. I do not forgive it in others. "That will scan," I said. "I'll type it as your epigraph when you publish your cookbook." He gave me a look that would curdle Hollandaise. "Pfui! I will publish nothing. I will eat, and men who wish to worship at the altar of their own cleverness will find other temples." I said, "Fine by me. Just don't let them bring their offerings through the south window." The corner of his mouth twitched, which counts as laughter if you have lived with him long enough. He reached for his beer and finished it like a man concluding an argument with a glass. Then he rang for Fritz and asked, not for more food, but whether the orchids needed misting. That's Nero Wolfe's way of saying the case is over. Now, generate the final section of the story, ensuring a satisfying resolution. Maintain the logical progression of clues and character arcs, delivering the final reveal smoothly while keeping the ending impactful and true to the detective style. 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 Detective